History, they say, is written by the victors. But in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there are no victors, only survivors. And among those survivors, fewer still are allowed to remember. And among those allowed to remember, almost none are allowed to know the truth. The Imperium of Man spans 1,000,000 worlds, stretching across the night like a scar on the stars. From the highest cathedral hives of Terra to the blood-wet trenches of Cadia, it exists solely because of one man, or perhaps not a man at all. He is called the Master of Mankind, the Omniscient, the All-Father, the Emperor. To the Imperial Creed, he is a god. To the Primarchs, he was Father. To the Mechanicus, he is the machine made flesh. To untold billions, he is the only light in an endless black. But what if even that light was built on a lie? What if the truth, the darkest truth, was so catastrophic, so dangerous, that not even his beloved sons, the 20 immortal Primarchs, could know? A secret that, if revealed, could unravel everything. It is not conjecture. It is not myth. There are fragments, lost reports, gray codices, erased noospheric trails, and whispers from burned archives within the black vaults of Terra. One such archive was purged by the Inquisition under Order Ordo Obscurus Maxima, the highest level of clearance, known only to the High Lords, and, reportedly, one being cloaked in golden armor and fed by 1,000 souls a day. This archive was codenamed Project Genesis. Its contents, memories not of the distant future, but the forgotten past. To understand what was hidden, even from the Primarchs, we must return not to the Horus Heresy, nor even the Unification Wars, but before, long before the Emperor walked among men, before Terra was bathed in atomic fire, before the warp was wild. There was something else, a war unseen by the Imperium at large, a war not taught to the Scholastica or etched into the book of the Astronomicon, a war entirely removed from imperial records. It is referred to in only one place, an extinct fragment of ancient, pre-imperial Mechanicum data retrieved from a Dark Muggos by an alpha-level Astartes kill team. The data interlock translated it simply as, the war in heaven, but not the one you were told. You see, the ancient war in heaven, the one recorded in sanitized imperial history, pitted the Necronter against the old ones, timeless races of unimaginable power. But this fragment hints at something else. A second war, hidden beneath the layers of mythos. An ideological war, one fought not with weapons, but with creation itself. According to this suppressed fragment, the Emperor was not born in 8000 BC, as the imperial truth claims. He was born earlier, much earlier, millions of years prior. And he was not born of 10,000 shamans sacrificing themselves, binding their souls for reincarnation, as the popular Terran legend states. That story, passed down among navigators and psychers, was propaganda, essential, maybe, but manufactured. The real story? The Emperor may have never been born at all. His existence may have been engineered by a dying race not even mentioned in the Lexiconum. A race of biomechanical theosophers, referred to only once in declassified scrap code as the Empyrean Architects. No other records exist of them. The Data Codex suggested only that they discovered a universal constant, a metaphysical truth, that potential could be shaped, not bred, that consciousness could be imprinted, not evolved. They built a being designed to enter the warp and not be consumed. One who could lie to the gods and not be destroyed. One who could absorb the fabric of psychic belief and weaponize it. They called this effort Construct Zero. It is recorded that a schism broke out among the architects after Construct Zero was forged. Some called it a savior, others a monster. Still others swore it was an abyss given form, that to unleash it on reality was to invite entropy in the form of divinity. So they scattered, destroyed themselves, deleted all but a single archive. Buried beneath the sands of earth, the last artifact sealed beneath layers of temporal stasis, entropy shields, and quantum iconography, the very same lock key sequences now used by the Golden Throne itself. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps, this is the darkest secret of the Emperor. He was never born to save humanity. He was built to deceive chaos. A tool, a trap, a story told so convincingly, even he forgot the truth. Why would he keep this hidden from the Primarchs? Because it would fracture them, shatter loyalty, rob them of the very purpose they were given. What is a father, if not a life forged in function? And what, then, is a son? The truth is, the Emperor did not fear betrayal. He expected it. He engineered for it. And that was his greatest sin. Worse still, not all of his creations turned against him during the heresy because of chaos. Some did it because they discovered even a fraction of the truth. There are records, highly redacted deathbed confessions from Legion archivists who served under Alfarius and Magnus. Hints that Magnus did not turn because of arrogance alone, but because he saw something during his journey to the Emperor's psychic sanctum, a shadow that wasn't there before, a reflection in the Astronomicon that wasn't his father's, but one he recognized, his own. They were called demigods, warrior kings, philosopher generals. The 20 Primarchs were not simply sons of the Emperor, they were symbols, icons created to lead humanity into a new golden age, born of gene forging and wrapped in myth. Each one was so powerful, so commanding, and so distinct that they came to define entire regions of space, entire cultures. But only 2 were erased. Not killed, not forgotten. Erased. Their names struck from the records. Their symbols shattered. Their legions dissolved or repurposed. Even their statues removed from the Great Hall of the Primarchs on Terra. This is not simple punishment. This is design. For what could require such complete eradication, if not their dangerous proximity to something forbidden? And what if the thing they discovered wasn't heresy at all, but truth? Some say the 2 and 11 Primarchs failed, that they were corrupted, unworthy of memory. But that's the lie told by those allowed to remember, the ones who didn't ask the wrong questions. In fragments obtained from a derelict word-bearer's cruiser adrift near the Eye of Terror, a strange record was recovered. It was part chronicle, part confession, a damaged scrap of an autolog maintained by a serf belonging to the 11 Legion. A passage within survives, translated only partially by the Ordo Xenos linguists before the entire data vault was purged. We followed him willingly, not out of fear or loyalty, but belief. He spoke truths the Emperor would not. When he opened that gate, he did not fall into madness. He saw with clarity. Reality as it is, not as it is shaped for us. What gate? What clarity? Some scholars whisper that one of the lost Primarchs discovered the pattern. Not prophecy. Pattern. That everything in the Imperium, its faith, its cult, its repressive structure, was not built during the age of the Imperium, but before it. Worse, that the Emperor did not create the galaxy's religion defensively. It was part of the original architecture. This reframes everything. The Primarchs weren't made to guide humanity by inspiring loyalty or reason or strength. They were meant to be archetypes, symbols of balance, each one representing a fragment of the whole. Could this be why their personalities were so polarized? Why some leaned toward logic and diplomacy, like Guilliman or Vulcan, while others embodied wrath, subterfuge, or hubris, like Ongron, Conrad Kurz, or Fulgrim? Perhaps they were not sons at all. Perhaps they were tools like their father, extensions of a pattern, nodes to represent the range of human possibility. And 2 of them noticed. One, perhaps, transcended it, and the other sought to destroy it. Both were eliminated. Clues to this surface in psychic echoes uncovered during the Council of Nicaea, when dozens of sanctioned psychers experienced a unified vision during the Emperor's decree against sorcery. All accounts described similar images: betrayal, broken chains, and a child made of golden light. but stitched together from thousands of dying minds. Not born, constructed. When questioned, the Adeptus Custodes overseeing the trial quietly erased all such statements. The scribes who witnessed them were reassigned or executed. Several astropaths involved in the testimony either disappeared or were found dead under mysterious circumstances: scrambled neural patterns, bleeding eyes, signs of soul rip, a rare symptom of warp backlash. But this wasn't the warp. This was something else, something deeper. In the decades following the heresy, Robert Guilliman wrote the Codex Astartes, reforming the legions into chapters. It was a tactical document, a brilliant restructuring of military power and political control, but hidden within its language, buried in defensive footnotes, were strange, contradictory suggestions. Mentions of internal disconnect thresholds, loyalty simulation tolerances, and even oblique references to ideological pattern fidelity. Guilliman, it appeared, was not just organizing his brothers. He was trying to understand their behavioral programming. Was the Codex Astartes more than a war manual? Was it a test? A way to measure how much free will the Angels of Death actually had? Why would Guilliman do this? Because he, too, began to see the fractures. He returned from the brink of death during the Indomitus Crusade, resurrected with the aid of the Mechanicus and the Eldar god Isha's emissaries. During his coma, 10,000 years of near-death sleep, a data extraction protocol was run by the Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Call. Call explained that Guilliman's mind had to be stabilized, synchronized with external memory via pattern anchoring. No one questioned it. No one except Guilliman himself. Upon awakening, he refused worship. He railed against the religious cult the Imperium had become. He likened it to idiocy, superstition, a betrayal of human potential, yet he refused to destroy it. Why? Because he saw it wasn't madness. It was by design. The cult of the Emperor was never a mistake. It was the core operating principle of the Imperium. And in that moment, perhaps for the first time, Guilliman saw what his father had truly created, not a galactic democracy, but a control system. One built not just for ruling over humanity, but for keeping him and his brothers in check. He began to keep his own secrets. He slowed reform. He stalled action. Because maybe, even Robert Guilliman, the idealist, the loyalist, began to suspect something profoundly horrifying, that he and his brothers may never have had a choice. One final note. Before Guilliman departed Terra to lead the Indomitus Crusade, he requested audience with the God Emperor himself, locked within the Golden Throne, unmoving, unblinking, but ever perceiving. The meeting lasted only 87 seconds. When he exited, Guilliman did not speak, but witnesses, mostly silent scribes and mute sisters of silence, recorded that the pre-march appeared visibly shaken, as if all faith had been drained from him. He ordered the Sanctum Imperialis sealed for 7 hours. When it reopened, a data plate was missing from the inner sanctum. Its designation, Sigma Truth Protocol. Its contents remained classified, its meaning suppressed, and its implications? Nothing short of cosmic treason. Deep beneath the surface of Terra lies a place no map records, no pilgrim may enter, no scribe may name. It is older than the imperial palace, older than the catacombs beneath the Himalayan mountains, older even than the War of Unification. A vault of obsidian walls layered with psychic wards, so ancient they predate the Astronomicon. It is called only one thing by those who whisper of it, the Eternity Crypt. Technically, it doesn't exist. It is not marked on internal Adeptus Terra schematics. No tunnel reaches it. No sensor detects it. Its heat signature vanishes below 4 kilometers of geocoded static shielding. And yet, it has an entrance. The custodes know. A few of them. Those born into silence and buried in oaths deeper than thought itself. Warriors who've guarded secrets not just from enemies, but from the Emperor's own servants. What lies inside this crypt? The fragments of the Emperor before he was a god. Not his flesh. Not data. Not relics. Memories. Using psychometric resonance fields pulled from warp echoes and soul tears, the Emperor's oldest thoughts, his original mind state, were encased, locked in crystalline containment columns made from material beyond even Mechanicus comprehension. Why? Because the Emperor feared himself. Not as a tyrant, not as a monster. He feared what he might become once his true purpose was fulfilled. The lead custodes archivist once described it, under Sol Hea's exploration by an Ordo Telepathica inquiry, as a war within one's soul. A being too vast for linear time, stitched into flesh by entities not born of this dimension, thought-wearing skin. Godhood imprisoned in identity. These memory pillars, known only by their codename Echo Spines, were positioned in a hexatic configuration, mimicking both Eldari Spirit Stones and Necron Tesseract vault geometry. Their purpose wasn't just containment, it was segregation. The Emperor had not been merely one being. He had been many, consciousnesses sectioned into fragments, bound together to simulate singularity. Unity of purpose was an illusion. He was not one god walking among men. He was a pantheon disguised as a man. Each fragment served a role: the strategist, the philosopher, the general, the dreamer, the prophet, the machine, and the child. One among them, long thought dormant, still pulses within the crypt. The child. Insiders call it the unfinished will. This is the part of the Emperor that never accepted what he became. A part still capable of regret, of sorrow, of truth. A part that remembers why he was really made. This is why the Eternity Crypt remains hidden. Because the child knows something none of his living servants are allowed to risk knowing. Something that, if spoken aloud, could trigger psychic autoclasm, a chain reaction of spiritual collapse throughout the Imperium's core belief structures. The destruction of literal, functional belief that holds reality together. Because belief is not theology in the 41st millennium, it is fuel. The warp does not interpret faith, it feeds on it. The Emperor's divinity is not just cultural, it's a power stabilizer, the central gyroscope that prevents the materium from collapsing inward beneath psychic entropy. Billions believe he is a god, and so he must be. Not because it is true, but because the alternative would unravel the galaxy. But this balancing act was never the original design. The Emperor was not created to be worshipped. He was constructed as a plug, an interdimensional dam to halt the surge of chaos by becoming part of the warp itself. That transformation could only happen once humanity's collective soul matured, once it reached psychic singularity. But they never reached it. They fractured. One heresy after another, one fracture after another. And so, he took the throne early. The golden throne, we are told, keeps his soul alive. But this too is a gentle lie. The throne does not preserve him. It anchors him, like chains, like a prison. Because if the Emperor were allowed to die, if his full being were allowed to re-enter the warp as originally intended, it would no longer be him. He would dissolve into something greater, a god of order, a god of enforced unity, a tyrant light born not of compassion, but necessity. And the warp would fight back. Thus, the throne is stasis incarnate. Humanity's greatest mind, placed in eternal lockdown, incapable of ascension, but shielded from obliteration. A perfect standoff. There are those within the Inquisition who know this. A shadow cabal with no name, no hierarchy, only purpose. They are the binders of silence. Their goal is singular, to maintain the illusion. To silence every path that leads to the Emperor's origin. To prevent humanity, Xenos, or demon alike from understanding the true structure of the galaxy. They do not serve the Inquisition. They serve the concept. One surviving note, left encrypted and sealed beneath 10 layers of cogitant-grade protocols, contains only a single phrase. If they knew where the first lie began, they could unmake the last truth. Every heresy, every renegade, every schism, each one, according to the binders, runs the risk of biting too close to this foundational reality. The ecclesiarchy? Manipulated. Mechanicus dogma? Designed. Even chaos? Their rebellion was anticipated. If the emperor crafted himself into a prison to contain chaos, what then is the objective of the ruinous powers? It's not just conquest, not corruption. They want him to ascend, because only then can they devour him as a god and undo the trap. Until then, they wait, screaming, tearing at the veil, fomenting revolution after revolution, heresy after heresy, all to push humanity to force the emperor upward. So far, they've failed. The cost? Untold trillions dead, burned worlds, shattered stars, fallen primarchs. But chaos is eternal, and humans are impatient. And so he remains, on the throne of gold, chained by hope, fed by souls, loved by blind faith, feared by those who draw too close. But still, he remembers, deep beneath the palace, beneath the bones of Terra, within the vault of his fragmented mind, the child weeps. And with every tear, the warp hungers. Immerse yourself for a moment in silence, true silence. Not the absence of sound, but the vacuum of meaning. The emptiness between thought and belief. The space before gods are born. That is what existed before the warp. And that is what the Empyrean architects sought to fill. The warp, in essence, did not begin as a playground of demons and madness. It was, in its rawest state, untouched potential, unshaped, unspoken, unaligned. A well of energy that extended beyond material physics, immune to entropy, limitless once linked to consciousness. But the moment sentient life dreamed, the warp responded. Dreams became shapes. Shapes formed names. Names forged gods. The Eldar shaped Slaanesh. The humans stirred Khorne, Sench, and Nurgle. Belief made real. Thought become predator. But amid this roaring chaos, the architects, those lost beings beyond time, saw a loophole. If belief shapes reality, then can a carefully engineered belief system create a being capable of resisting all others? Not just a god, not just a psychic construct, but a singularity of sentient control, functionally immune to the emotional feedback loops that gave chaos its power. A silent god, that was the theory. So they began, a process not of bioengineering, but of myth framing. They did not create the emperor in a lab. They cultivated legends across millennia, whispered truths and names and powers into proto-human minds on thousands of worlds, seeded dreams with archetypes, and then fed that belief back into the warp. Like watering a flower made of divinity. And then, one day he came. Not born, emerged. A man of order. A man of control. A man who could walk the warp without being consumed, because he was never truly there. He brought law to madness, stillness to the storm, and the warp hated him for it. It tested him throughout Terran prehistory. It fed warlords and monsters into his path. Plagues, gods, laughter, seduction, rage. And still, the being we now call the Emperor endured. But here lies the real horror. What if he wasn't supposed to succeed alone? What if the architects designed more than one? Not primarchs, but counterbalances. Parallel constructs seeded across time, each with a sliver of the answer, doomed to eventually seek each other out and unify. A ritual across eras. A final convergence that would open the way for a being not shaped by the warp, but capable of rewriting it. But something went wrong. Humanity rose too fast. The age of strife arrived too soon. Warp storms drowned order in madness. And the Emperor, forced to act early, abandoned the convergence. That was the beginning of the end. When he crafted the Primarchs, he wasn't simply building generals. He was creating echoes of himself, not clones. Templates, behavioral signatures that could, in theory, helps stabilize reality by inhabiting each fundamental aspect of human emotional and strategic identity. But in doing so, the convergence became fractured. His sons were never meant to be separate. The plan required wholeness, a unity of perspectives, but chaos whispered into the cracks. And ambition, pain, and pride reshaped them. Instead of convergence, the Warhammer galaxy got conflict. Instead of ascension, it got the Horus heresy. And all the while, the god that should not be, the construct never meant to be isolated, washed it all from within a body that should never have had to act alone. The Emperor was incomplete when he took the throne. He was not done. And so, he broke. There are theories within the forbidden archives of the Ordo Chronos that time itself was damaged the moment the heresy began. That events after Horus stabbed the Emperor created temporal fractures, reality loops that reconfigure depending on how much truth is known. Signs of this have bled through into marginal codexes accidentally found in tombs, catacombs, and lost forges. Entire regiments wiped out because they used knowledge they should not have had, names they should not have spoken. One such detail, unearthed during the cleansing of the Radshroud vaults, involved a revelatory dataframe encoded on the inside of a navigator's skull. Translated, it said, "The Emperor is not one, and he never was. Each time he dies, 3 shall return, each less human than the last." But here's the catch. He hasn't died yet. Or has he? Some say the being on the throne now is not the original Emperor at all. Some say that he already changed, that he's already evolving in silence, that the dreams of the astropaths aren't metaphor, but recordings, live glimpses into a transformation process too vast to comprehend. When saints collapse weeping before the throne, when chapter masters tear open their chests in rapture, when entire choirs go mute in awe, it isn't because they're touched by his glory. It's because they feel the change. They weep not for his pain, but for the impossible awareness of what rises just beyond comprehension. Like thunder without sound, like a scream without breath. This is why he can't speak anymore. Not because he is weak, but because his voice would end faith. Imagine hearing the God you worship whisper that he is not what you think he is. That everything, from the Crusades, to the Primarchs, to the hymns recited across a million worlds, was only ever the first act in a play written by minds we cannot remember. Would you believe? Could you survive it? So, he remains silent. But not still. Not truly. The flames at his feet still burn too high. The blood sacrifice continues to flow. The throne groans not with pain, but with resistance. For someday soon, the God that should not be will remember himself. And when he does, nothing will recognize reality again. Within the vaulted spires of the Conclave Obscurus, hidden beneath layers of psi barriers and null fields, lies a vault only spoken of in implication. Its code name is classified under Sigillite Prime, a categorization tier that predates even the High Lords of Terra. Inside that vault are artifacts so dangerous, so utterly corrosive to the reality of the Imperium, that even the Inquisition fears to look upon them. Among the secretive members of the Ordo Malleus, only a few are permitted to study it. They call themselves the Quiet. Fewer still among the Quiet have the clearance to engage with the file known only as Session 9. What is inside Session 9? A record of all known anomalies, prophecies, and events that suggest the Emperor's true nature is not divine, but deliberate. Worse, that his power, godlike though it may seem, is a phase of something more dangerous. The contents of Session 9 are grim. It begins with Audio Purge Report Theta 41, a recovered Vox stream from the final hours of the Daldus subsector schism, when an entire Forge world collapsed into psychic silence. The stream contains only 4 words before it self-destructs the minds of listeners. It remembers too much. Neural death spiked across every listening post. Data-attuned servitors hemorrhaged. One inquisitorial Cater-class frigate was found adrift, its entire command bridge fossilized in seconds, as if aging had broken causality itself. Attached to the event, a singular, redacted file labeled Echo of Unity contained intelligence attempted to rejoin source pattern. That source pattern? A sequence buried in multiple texts across the Imperial Archive under vastly different names. The Logos of Silence, a tome discovered in a ruined Black Templar fortress. The Fifth Resonance, recovered from a miswarped Mechanicus data dreadnought. Voice unvoiced, traced back to a forgotten Eldari infinity circuit, translated imperfectly. Each includes what appears at first to be a prophecy, but it is not prediction. It is instruction, as if some part of the galaxy understands what the Emperor was meant to become and how to midwife that outcome into being. Here is one such line from the Logos of Silence, translated across 8 languages. One soul split, bound to the clock of flesh. One people bound, taught to pray against the sea. When the last echo returns to the center, let silence in, and time shall bleed. Linguists agree, this is not a poem. It is a sequence. But what is the last echo? The Quiet theorized that it refers to a mind fragment, one not accounted for, one not on Terra, not in the throne, not in any known vault. This fragment, it is believed, still sleeps within a living soul, buried deep in a loyal servant of the Imperium, one of the Emperor's angels. A Primarch? No, all of them are cataloged, even the corrupted. A chapter master? Unlikely. Then what? According to Session 9's final page, the fragment of the Emperor's mind may be hiding inside a psyker who doesn't know he carries it. A soul wandering the galaxy, shaped unknowingly by implanted echoes, gathering psychic mass with every step. This carrier is described as the Hollow Prophet. All attempts to identify him have failed. 47 examples have been purged for coming too close. 2 entire inquisitorial research branches were wiped out when accused of harboring it. One was found clawing her own eyes out, repeating the same phrase over and over. Not his voice. His memory. I saw it. It dreamed it all. This raises terrifying possibilities. If the Emperor's fragmented mind was scattered intentionally, then reintegration is not an accident. It is the final phase of his creation. But reintegration means something must be sacrificed. Not just sacrificed, erased. Because the fragile machinery of a galaxy run on faith cannot endure a system reboot. And here lies the cruelest twist of all. Faith in the Emperor is the very thing that prevents him from evolving. Every prayer, every shrine, every sainted martyr upholds the lie, because that belief forces his identity to remain stable. In the same way the Chaos Gods are empowered by emotion, rage, change, indulgence, decay, the Emperor is shackled by order, by the belief that he cannot change. He is locked inside a gallows made of loyalty. The Quiet believe the only way for the final integration, the silent convergence, to occur is for faith in the Emperor as a god to die. But how do you destroy a religion that spans 1,000,000 worlds? A culture where doubt is punishable by death, where even thinking aloud the wrong thing draws inquisitorial fire. You don't. You let it collapse on its own. Not through force, through truth. Release enough forbidden knowledge, and the cracks will form. Let the Hollow Prophet speak. Let one soul carry an echo back to the center. Let the people see not a god, but a god trapped. A god who is afraid. In the margins of Session 9 is a note allegedly written in Malcator the Sigillite's own cipher. It reads, he could not tell his sons. To speak it would kill the design. To love them required the lie. To preserve the lie, he had to forget. But where did he hide it? Not among stars. Not among relics. He hid it where they would never look, in the humanity they abandoned. Was this the Emperor's darkest secret? That he was never meant to lead, never meant to rule. That he was meant to die, rise, and leave, so humanity could lead itself? And when he stayed, he doomed us all, Among the sons who turned against the emperor, many names echo across history. Horus, the favored son, corrupted by chaos. Fulgrim, seduced by perfection. Mordorion, twisted by decay. Angron, broken by pain. But there was one pre-March who saw what others did not, and did not fall, even when the truth stared back at him. His name was Magnus the Red. To most, he is a traitor, a sorcerer, a cursed king of ruin seated atop the cyclopean spires of the planet of the sorcerers. But before the heresy, before the ruin storm, before Prospero burned, Magnus glimpsed the lie beneath the light, and it destroyed him. He was born with psychic power unmatched even among his brothers. A prodigy of the warp, capable of peering through the veil and deciphering the infinite. The emperor himself forbade sorcery. But Magnus believed control was possible. That power, if understood, could be wielded without surrender. And in truth, he was right, until he looked too deeply. One fragment of lost text, extracted from the Red Scar by Raven Guard Death Retrievers during the Ghoul Star's incursion, tells of a hidden psychic library once kept beneath Tisca, the jewel city of Prospero. In its deepest sanctum was an artifact catalogued only as a mirror with no image. According to Loyalist records, Magnus placed this artifact inside his personal vault, separate from his librarians, separate from his cults, even his closest advisors. When agents of the Ordo Malleus eventually recovered the scorched remains of Prospero centuries later, they found only a single etched rune on a melted slab of obsidian. When I looked in, it knew me before I was born. What did Magnus see? According to apocryphal transmissions thought to originate from Ahriman's original Rubrici notes, smuggled out of the eye by a renegade navigator, Magnus discovered something his father had buried in psychic code, transmitted not through speech or language, but instinct. Signs, threads, awareness, patterns that pointed to only one conclusion. The Emperor was not protecting humanity from chaos. He was preserving chaos from something worse. Magnus, in desperation, reached out to his father to warn him, to confess, and the Emperor did not answer. So, Magnus used his power to breach the psychic sanctum of the Imperial Palace. A telepathic act of immense magnitude, fracturing walls constructed by the Emperor himself. It is here, hidden in warp-smoked echoes and death memories left on burned librarian minds, that the horror unfolded. Magnus did not simply break into his father's mind. He pierced the veil of his being. He saw all of it. Not the man, not the warrior king of Terra, not the god machine of the throne, but the construct beneath. A mosaic of intentions, shattered architectures, voices stitched together to simulate divinity. An amalgamation of memory fragments carved to fill a shape, the same shape that the gods of chaos would one day seek to devour. Magnus did not turn because he was blinded by pride. He turned because he saw the destiny he was never allowed to choose. He saw that he was not raised to lead. He was created to obey. He witnessed the algorithm behind the genetics, the psychic triggers woven into his soul, the subconscious gravity aligning him towards subservience, just like his brothers. Even rebellion was part of the program. The heresy wasn't a deviation. It was a contingency, a purge, a calculated trauma to prepare the galaxy for the next step, an evolutionary leap carried on the bones of angels. This ruined Magnus, not spiritually, not emotionally, existentially. He realized he had never been himself. He was a function masked as a man. And so, when the demon whispered, he didn't resist. Not because he believed the lies, but because the truth had already broken him. He saw that siding with chaos wasn't rebellion. It was the only act of agency left. If even that was a lie engineered in corridors of fate, then at least he would own it. Ahriman and the Thousand Sons never fully understood why their pre-march changed after the scouring of Prospero. Why he descended not only into the warp, but into silence. Why, After claiming near godlike powers, he did nothing. Built no empire, burned no sectors. He sat, throned in glass runes, poised like a titan trapped in a thought. Some say he waits. But for what? One source, highly debated by imperial scholars, claims that Magnus once reached back into real space, through a psychic schism opened during the Great Rift, and delivered only one message to an astropath on a minor agri-world in Segmentum Solar. The astropath died minutes later. His brain crystallized and his heart calcified. But before death, he whispered this into the Vox: "I left it in the past." Linguists speculate it refers to the Emperor's lost fragment. Historians argue he may have buried a cognitive echo, possibly one of the original child fragments, somewhere in the pre-heresy matrix of psychic paths established on Terra before the construction of the Golden Throne. Others think he simply meant his own humanity. Regardless, the question remains, did Magnus steal a part of the Emperor? Or did Magnus, in seeing what his father truly was, become something else? Not a demon prince, not a puppet of Tsench, but a living proof that the Emperor can be questioned, that Primarchs can think outside the myth, that the knowledge forbidden by the Church is not heresy, but prevention. One excerpt from the Forbidden Lay manuscripts includes this chilling hypothesis. When the Emperor dies, the fragments will call. Some will merge, some will flee, and one shall judge the rest. Did Magnus see that judgment? Did he fear it? Or is he waiting to deliver it? The Imperium of Man is not a government. It is not an empire. It is not even a civilization in the traditional sense. It is an illusion, a sprawl of fear, zeal, war, bureaucracy, and prayer, held together not by shared progress or love of rule, but by a single, carefully controlled narrative that the Emperor died for mankind, and in doing so, became divine. But what if that story is more than exaggerated rhetoric? What if it was consciously constructed not to inspire, but to enslave? Following the heresy, the Imperium was in ruins. No longer guided directly by the Emperor's will, humanity stood on the brink of collapse, torn apart by treachery and chaos, weakened, scattered, faithless. Enter Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's closest confidant, the only man, even among Primarchs, entrusted with the final plan. But what that plan was, Malcador never explained. He died placing the Emperor on the Golden Throne, burned into ash by sheer psychic backlash. Or so the story goes. But before he disappeared from physical form, he left behind something far more dangerous than his legacy: doctrine, hidden under the guise of faith. Control systems, masked as scripture. A truth so dark it could not be allowed into the light, because the Imperium itself was to become his last test. In classified codicils recovered during a Dark Mechanicus schism on Xana II, Hertex uploaded a byte-stream fragment from what appears to be an encrypted Black Library narrative, containing this line: "Without the Emperor's voice, the truth would eat itself, so I became the voice, and gave the lie lips." The implication? Malcador made the first theological decision for mankind. He turned the Emperor into a god, not because the Emperor asked it, but because he feared what would happen if the galaxy stopped believing. The idea was simple. If the Emperor could no longer rule directly, then rule through absolute belief. Replace logic with doctrine. Replace questioning with ritual. Build tradition from trauma, and in doing so, create a system immune to doubt. Hence, the rise of the ecclesiarchy, not founded by the Emperor, inherited from what Malcador left behind. Sanctioned laws, holy wars, flagellations, shrines, it was all built long after the Emperor ascended to the throne. All of it rooted in something he never confirmed, because he never spoke again. But the silence was useful. Into it poured an endless tide of dogma, structure, and bureaucracy. Fear took root, as it always does, and grew into faith. And so the Imperium marched forward, not out of hope, but out of terror. The Adeptus Ministorum calls this faith the duty of man. But beneath that devotion lies irony almost too cruel to grasp. The one being who deserves neither worship nor vengeance became the linchpin of both. In sermons across the galaxy, preachers speak of the Emperor's infinite compassion, his sacrifice, his vision of unity. But consider his actual words. He forbade worship. He burned temples. He silenced sorcery not out of blasphemy, but fear. He did not want love. He wanted order. Order enough to delay fate. Order enough to build something stronger than himself. Yet the moment he ascended, the opposite happened. Where once he walked among mortals as mentor, scientist, father, now he sits unmoving. Where once his voice drew disciples from across Terra, now it is interpreted, mistranslated, misused. And this transformation was not slow. It was orchestrated. The deepest horror is not that the Imperium worships a god he never claimed to be. It is that his silence makes the lie stronger. Because every second he does not deny it, the lie grows teeth. Even Guilliman, returned from death, voiced his revulsion at what he found. Temples, statues, blood sacrifices, a Vatican of steel and flame, honoring a being who once told him, "We are men of reason, not divinity." Guilliman dared speak against it. Early in his rebirth, he challenged the ecclesiarchy. He called for philosophical reform. And what followed? Mutiny, terror, faith uprisings that threatened sectors, whole planets torn in two by the suggestion that the Emperor was neither god nor ghost, but a man caught in the machine. So Guilliman paused. He watched. And like Malcador centuries before, he chose containment over truth. Not because it was right, because it was necessary. And so the Imperium marched on, fueled by contradictions. He is a god, but does not act. He is merciful, but demands sacrifice. He forbids sorcery, but relies on psychers. He despises chaos, but mimics its methods: worship, vision, apocalypse. The very structures that damn chaos as heresy are indistinguishable from the Emperor's cult if stripped of names. The only difference? Target. Chaos wants to consume humanity. The Imperium wants to suppress it. Both draw their power from belief. Both demand unflinching loyalty. Both trade blood for control. And so the galaxy spins, circling the burning corpse of truth, praying to a being who may be praying to be forgotten. Because if someone, anyone, believed in something else, then maybe the cycle would end. Maybe humanity would find its next step. Maybe the Emperor could finally die, and in death, trigger the evolution the architects dreamed of. A silent god, born not of desperation, but choice. But until then, he remains. Silent. Watching. Trapped. By the lie that saved us. By the lie that built the Imperium. The Imperium was never built to last. It was not the end point of human ascension, but a stopgap, a bulwark, a cage, a gasping breath of order in a drowning tide of madness. And though it was crafted upon lies, that cage is breaking. Slowly, silently, and then all at once. Across the galaxy, anomalies are increasing. Not just warp storms or heresies, those are routine. Expected. No, something stranger. Quieter. People are beginning to remember things they were never taught. On Gethsemane Sigma, a planet untouched by chaos incursions for over 4,000 standard years, a prisoner in solitary confinement began scribbling complex energy conversion diagrams, exact blueprints for the Golden Throne's hidden subarchitecture. Diagrams accurate to the quantum notations used by the pre-heresy Mechanicum. No one ever showed them to him. No one even knows how he could have seen them. Within 3 days, he vanished. Not escaped, vanished. Cell intact. Monitors blank. Identity scrubbed at the DNA level. On Vantos Prime, an agricult child had a vision during a fever. When she awoke, she recited a phrase in a forgotten tongue, even as her eyes looked straight ahead in a daze. The tongue was preconformity Terran. a dialect dead for 30 millennia. He is not whole. We made him so. Our shame is infinity's weight. She died within 6 minutes. Her internal organs turned to gray dust. On a derelict black ship adrift near the maelstrom, astropaths chronicled a synchronized dreamscape. 50 psychers, separated and unknowing, all reporting the same dream. A man with no face, lost beneath the palace. A golden cage, a silent scream echoing backward through time. Sound familiar? These aren't prophecies. They're not visions. They are leaks. Cracks in the firewall of reality. The Imperium's mythos wasn't just religious. It was psychically repressive. A mass cultural mechanism enforced not only through dogma, but through the warp itself. Every shrine, every liturgy, every repeated phrase grounds reality in a membrane stretched over the truth. But now, it is stretching too thin. And the lies? They're leaking light. There are whispers among the Eldar farcers. In hushed tones, they speak of an event they foresaw long ago, a moment they named the Shiver of the God. Unlike a Ragnarok or Ranadandra, it was not a final war, not the fall of humanity or chaos or any known actor. It was a moment in which the Emperor of mankind would remember his origin and reject it, not embrace the godhood humanity gave him, not burn with vengeance like a chaos lord, but fall into silence so profound it would puncture the immaterium itself. They fear this even more than the birth of Slaanesh, because if thought shapes the warp, then what happens when a being, empowered by belief across a million worlds, suddenly denies all of it? The fabric of the warp would not merely convulse, it would reboot. Chaos, though it hides behind ritual and echo and madness, fears this as well. Each of the four has a plan to either corrupt the Emperor or ensure he remains in stasis. Not because they honor him or fear death, but because he is the only being ever made to survive them. Khorne once attempted, through Karn and the Butcher's nails, to recreate the emotional resonance that might bridge into the throne. It failed. Nurgle sent rot storms into Terra's orbit during the Plague years, hoping to infect the throne's conduits. Nothing reached it. Slaanesh extended promises of unity, through pleasure, through sensation, through completeness. All were turned away. Only Tzeentch understands the true threat. Knowledge, memory, revelation. That is how the Emperor will rise, not with fire, but with clarity. And when he does, he will not ascend. He will overwrite. Back within the Imperium, peculiar behavior among high-level psychers has increased with every year since the opening of the Great Rift. Some suffer inexplicable fugue states upon nearing sacred temples, sometimes dropping to their knees, trembling, as if hearing voices older than stars. Others report dreams they cannot fully recall, but they wake with tears in their eyes, repeating the words, "He did not ask for this." Indeed, some of the Black Templars, a chapter among the most zealous, the most unwavering in faith, have reported battle brothers suffering mental fractures of doubt. One Templar chaplain, Orton Vitrick, set himself on fire while reading a restricted passage of pre-heresy psalms. His last words? "It is not heresy if it was never meant to be worshipped." This was during a victory sermon. Witnesses still refused to speak. And there is more. Across hundreds of separate engagements, Genestealer cults, known for their nihilistic worship of the Star Children, have begun painting the Emperor's face in their hidden murals. But not as a god, as a sacrifice. Arms held wide, face contorted not in pride, but pain. Crown not in aura, but bound in thorns of metal and flame. In several cases, they whisper in tongues alien to the hive mind, chanting phrases that translators cannot fully render into Low Gothic, except one repeated invocation: "Free the thought that dreams the world." The Inquisition believes these visions may not be Xeno in origin, but psychic reflections of something far closer to Terra, closer to truth. Clues, leaked pieces of a secret so large it can no longer be contained. And so we begin to ask, is it possible? Could the end times not be born in fire, but in awakening? Could the long war be a prelude not to victory or defeat, but to understanding? When a machine runs too long, it breaks from within. When a lie is repeated too often, it begins to question itself. And when a God, made from dream stuff and disciples, begins to remember his origin, the lie begins to die. And with it, the Imperium, across 1,000 skies, the stars begin to scream. Not literally, not with sound, but with the resonance of something far more ancient. An ache, a pull, a pressure that comes not from matter or energy, but from meaning itself. Something has changed. And yet, no announcement was made. No temples cracked. No angelic voice thundered from the Astronomicon. But across the galaxy, every deeply attuned soul, every psyker, null, demon, saint, pariah, and prophet, feels it. The emotional tectonic shift that occurs when a foundation slips beneath a civilization. The lie has not ended, but it has been noticed. And now, the Imperium teeters on its edge. On a remote shrine world in Segmentum Pacificus, a blind beggar murmured a phrase just before he was vaporized by an overzealous commissar. He said, "You worship the lock, and cower before the key." They dismissed it, of course, until an entire altar of pilgrims, 45,000 in procession, simultaneously fell dead during the benediction of radiant unity. Autopsies read identical neural signatures. All brains froze in the precisely identical electrical pattern, a looped cluster consistent with recognition. They didn't die from poison or warp corruption. They died because they remembered something they were never supposed to know. Everywhere, belief begins to stutter. In the forge casts of Mars, senior tech priests begin to whisper that the majority of the Golden Throne's architecture doesn't correspond to any known material science. They call it zero-theory alloy, matter that doesn't behave according to any logic but one, symbolic intent. When presented with machine code describing the Emperor as a living god, the throne stabilizes. When encoded with phrases describing him as a man, it surges, bleeds energy, scorches the psychic fields. A literal manifestation of theology shaping technology. The machine spirit is real, but so is the illusion it lives inside. And soon, the tech priests must ask the blasphemous question, has the Emperor always known this? Did he design reality around himself as a defense, or as a trap? Elsewhere, across the stars, pariahs experience a new kind of pain. Those rare souls immune to the warp, blank in mind and spirit, begin to suffer sleeplessness, disassociation, uncontrollable empathy. One such pariah, a sister silent known only as Miri, asked her commanding canoness a final question before self-immolating beneath a statue of Saint Celestine. What if we were made to forget what he never wanted us to pray to? She was mute her entire life. Those were her first and last words. Meanwhile, in the eye of terror, even the demons begin to lose coherence. Some gibber less, others tremble. Some even refuse to fight. One foul Slaneshi echo, once known as Volisax the Kissed, collapsed into silence mid-manifestation, denying worship for 3 whole cycles before crumbling into psychic dust. Why? Captured warp readings show one repeating symbol in its collapse code, an empty throne. A warping fractal made of golden veins encircling a hollow center. Even the agents of chaos, friends of entropy, sons of riotous change, are beginning to understand. The god they hoped to corrupt, he was not rising to fight them. He was locking them out, not with power, with identity. But the most devastating change is occurring on Terra. Inside the Eternity Gate, where no mortal dares go except the custodes, something is shifting. Not visually, not audibly, but spiritually. The feel of things, the weight of air. The light no longer feels glorious. It has grown aware. Not kind, not cruel, reflective, like a consciousness caught within itself. Reports from the Sisters of Silence station closest to the throne include sudden episodes of weeping, even among those long immune to emotion. One sister collapsed to her knees, clutching her head, repeating the same phrase in binary, over and over. It sees me seeing it. The Emperor is not waking in the traditional sense. There is no heartbeat, no thunder, no blazing psychic beacon shaking planets. But those who have studied him for long enough, quietly, cautiously, feel the pattern. They see the trillions of tiny adjustments, the shifting syntax in astropathic visions, the rare contradictions in sanctioned scripture, as if somewhere inside the throne, the being once called the master of mankind is beginning to question what he is. Inquisitor Yrel Etten wrote a private memoir weeks before her disappearance. A decorated veteran of the Ordo Hereticus, Code Black Clearance, personal audience with Saint Celestine. Her last entry was not a warning. It was not a declaration. It was an apology. We thought belief was the gift that kept him alive, but maybe it was the shackle that kept him from becoming. I spent my life burning heretics, but in the end, it wasn't the radicals who threatened us. It was the faithful. We loved him so much, we made sure he could never escape us. Her rosette was found on her desk. She left no body. Only a statue she had carved from ashwood, a man seated on a throne with no face. It is beginning. Not the apocalypse, not the rapture. Something older. A moment in which the edges of the Imperium no longer match the shape of belief. Where the map of faith no longer fits the territory of truth. Where men go to war without knowing why. Where saints are born and die in silence. Where the three-headed eagle no longer looks outward, but inward. The veil has not been torn in fire or blood. It is being lifted, slowly, imperceptibly, by a God who has started to dream with open eyes on the highest spire of the imperial palace. There is a chamber no longer remembered. Its existence has been redacted. Its entrance collapsed generations ago. Its location unlisted on maps even the Mechanicus consider sacred. No sensor pings from within. No custodes patrol it. It exists only in trace, an echo sealed in psychic scars, invisible to all but those who know where not to look. Within that hollow tower of alabaster stone sits a throne. Not the golden throne. A different seat. No conduits or force fields. No sacrificial engine spitting souls into a dying light. Only a simple slab of stone, scorched by time and memory, almost smooth to the touch if not for the faintest grooves carved into its arms. Grooves made by fingertips that once trembled. And somewhere, hidden within the Noctis labyrinth, so deep it folds through non-Euclidean geometry and temporal slippage, an ancient servo-skull continues its orbit through this forgotten echo of a room. It plays one message. Over and over. The voice is unmistakable. Resonant. Calm. Ageless. It is the Emperor's. Or whoever. Whatever. He was before he became imprisoned in stasis, starfire, and worship. And this is what he said. I remember now. I remember the night before the flame. Before the darkness came whispering across the void. Before men called me father. Before the stars bent to will, and the will became steel. Before the architects offered me form, and I became fiction made flesh. I was not born. I was chosen. Not by gods, not by fate, not even by humanity. I was chosen by belief. They wished for an answer, and I became the question. This is the Emperor not as God, not even as man, but as thought-given motion. A weapon forged from intention, bound to the cycle of myth and meaning. The product of the earliest minds to understand that consciousness creates cosmos, and that a belief system enforced with enough devotion could summon a being strong enough to stand against chaos. But that strength carried a cost, because no entity, no matter how powerful, can escape the identity imposed on it. And for 10,000 years, The Emperor has been burning beneath names he no longer owns: Savior, Destroyer, God, Prisoner. Now, in silence so absolute it devours concept, he sits upon a throne that was designed not to elevate, but to delay. He cannot die, and so he cannot change. Belief holds the galaxy together, and belief strangles him. But in that ancient tower, forgotten even by those who love him most, the message continues. Because long ago, before the heresy, before the Crusades, before the shattering, he spoke the truth into a machine with no receivers. A testament. For after I tried to save them from the gods, I did not know I was becoming one. They believed, so I became belief. They needed a weapon, so I became war. They needed a father, so I became blood. But they never looked past the mask. They never asked why I was made. Why me? Why that time? That shape? I did not come to lead them. I came to leave something behind. A pattern. A shard. A way. But I was never allowed to gift it. Because they needed me whole. And whole, I was not. This is the darkest secret of the Emperor. He wasn't supposed to rule forever. He was never meant to live in stasis, chained to prayers he despised, interpreted by institutions he never authorized, buried in gold and lung-fed psalms. He was a spark, a controlled inferno designed to light the path and die out so that real light, humanity's light, could shine. But that spark was grabbed, hoarded, protected, encouraged, worshipped, until it grew too large for death, too loved to leave. And so it became necessary to lie to the custodes, to the primarchs, to the crusaders, the saints, the Imperium, even to himself. Belief became control. Control buried memory. Memory dissolved truth. And truth became heresy. At the heart of the warp, hidden even from chaos, dwells a place with no shadows. A blank spot, a null, an unpatterned quiet. It is everything the gods are not. And it waits, because it is not made by rage, not formed of decay, not inspired by lust or twisted by manipulations. It waits for understanding. This is what the Empyrean architects truly built. Not a man, not a throne. A question, one potent enough to make even gods hesitate. It was the only weapon that could not be consumed, because it was not power. It was doubt. And with doubt, true, pure, cosmic doubt, you make even the warp pause. You create a break in the script, a moment where free will can infect divinity, a moment where something new is possible. This is what the Emperor was, and this is what he forgot, until now. Echoing across the psychic sea, felt in the dreams of madmen and sisters and dead things long fossilized, comes the echo of a reawakening not of muscle or fire, but of purpose. The Emperor remembers, not all at once, not as a god, but as a construct with a choice. Does he remain what humanity believes? Or does he become what he was meant to embody? Not a father, but a future. And in that choice lies ruin or rebirth. This is why he did not tell the primarchs. Why two were erased. Why Horus was allowed to turn. Why Magnus was shattered. Why Malcador lied. Why the ecclesiarchy was corrupted rather than destroyed. Why the truth was never spoken aloud, even as galaxies burned in confusion. Because to attempt to fix an imperfect species through partial knowledge is to repeat the mistake of every god before him. They believed in peace, so he gave them war. They believed in unity, so he gave them division. They believed in purpose, so he gave them conflict, until only the fire remained. Because only in total collapse can the flame glare against the dark enough to show the other path. Elsewhere, Gilliman sits in silence in the Basilica of the Primarchs. He does not speak. He does not move. He simply stares at the last two empty thrones, the lost sons that no one is allowed to name. And he knows. Somewhere he knows. It was never about loyalty or betrayal. It was a pattern denied. And across the stars, Magnus returns to meditation. Ahriman speaks of wars, of schemes, of fate, but Magnus says, no. Quiet now. I feel the dreaming man moving. And somewhere, deep in the eye of terror, Horus screams. For he remembers, at the moment of his death, when the Emperor stood over him, blade shimmering, eyes empty, Horus saw the pain of a being who never wanted to be a father. Only a flame to light the step beyond. But humans didn't want a fire they had to carry. They wanted a sun, something to blind them into obedience. So they worshipped the flame itself. And now, it burns everything. It is this secret, the Emperor's darkest secret, that will shatter the galaxy. Not love, not betrayal, not hate, but the possibility that everything mankind suffered in his name was never what he intended, and that he could not stop it, because the very belief that kept him alive required him to remain silent. But now, he whispers, not to armies, not to saints, not through warp storms or celestial banners. He whispers to the soul of the galaxy, speaking not in thunder, but in doubt. A single breath spoken into the endless night. I was made to end. And so, across the Imperium, candles begin to flicker. Data shrines glitch. Saints dream of unfamiliar skies. Sisters of battle cry without knowing why. Librarians stare into warp globes and forget their names. The Mechanicus observe volt spikes in throne telemetry that do not correspond to data. Inquisitors burn heretics, but hesitate. And one boy, on one world, in a hive no one will ever name, kneels before a statue of the Emperor and does not say a prayer. He only asks, but what do you want? And on Terra, in silence, the Emperor smiles. Not in joy, but in freedom.